Hello, children. It's Grandma Carla, and today is a very special day. It is the birthday of my granddaughter, Charis Ann, and today Charis Ann is 7 years old. So I want to sing her happy birthday, and then I would like to dedicate our new book, Freddy Goes to Florida, to little Charis Ann, who is not so little anymore, 7 years old. That sounds impossible. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Charis. Happy birthday to you and many more. This is Grandma, and I love you, Charis Ann. All right, children, so for Charis Ann today and for everybody out there, Freddy Goes to Florida is by Walter R.Brooks. And if we like this book, there are just loads and loads of Freddy books that are written by Walter R. Brooks. They were written quite a while ago. They're old books, but they're good books. So let's read this first one here and see how it goes. Charles, a rooster, came out of the front door of the chicken coop and walked slowly across the barnyard. It was still very dark in the barnyard, for it was 4:30 in the morning, and the sun was not yet up. He shivered and thought of the nice warm perch in the coop, but there was a reason why he did not go back to it. Mr. Bean, the farmer, did not have very much money, and he could not afford to buy an alarm clock, and he relied on the rooster to wake him up bright and early in the morning. The last time Charles had overslept, Mr. Bean had been very angry and had threatened to have him fricasseed with baking powder biscuit for Sunday dinner. Charles did not like getting up early before any of the other birds and the animals were stirring, but he felt that it was better to get up than to be fricasseed. And so this morning he hopped sleepily onto a post, and after clearing his throat several times, began to crow. Cock-a-doodle-doo! Cock-a-doodle-doodle-doo! The eastern sky grew brighter and brighter and pinker, and for a long time nothing else happened. Then some robins began talking together, in little quiet voices in the big elm tree that grew by the barn. And a young chipmunk came scampering along the fence and stopped on the post right next to Charles and started to wash his face with his paws. And down in the house where the pigs lived, there was a great grunting and squealing, so that Charles knew that the pigs were beginning to think about breakfast, and he crowed some more. And here's a picture of Charles clearing his throat. After clearing his throat, he began to crow. And there's Charles. You see the picture of him up on the fence post, crowing away. He's got a very important job. And at last, far off across the fields, where the sky came down to meet them, there appeared a little spark of bright gold that grew and grew until it looked like a bonfire, and then like a house on fire, and then like a whole city burning up. And that was the upper edge of the sun, coming up from the other side of the world, where all night long it had been shining on Chinese pagodas and the Himalayas and the jungles in Africa and all the queer places where people work and play, while we are sound asleep. And just as the edge of the sun came into sight, the head of Mr. Bean, the farmer, appeared at his bedroom window. He had on a white cotton nightshirt with a red tassel, and his face was completely hidden behind his bushy gray whiskers, so that nobody, not even his wife, had ever seen what he really looked like. And he was looking out to see what kind of a day it was going to be. As soon as Mr. Bean poked his head out of the window, Charles hopped down from the post. His day's work was already done, and although he was still cold and sleepy, he did not go back to the hen house, for his wife and his 8 sisters were up by this time, and nobody could get a minute's peace with all that cackle, he muttered angrily. I'll go take 40 winks in the barn. Good morning, Charles, said Hank, the old white horse, whose stall was nearest the door. Touch of winter in the air this morning. Charles flew up and perched on the edge of Hank's manger. Touch of winter, he exclaimed. I guess there is. It's cold, that's what it is. Downright cold. Well, we've got to expect it now, said Hank. Snow will be flying in another month or two. Ugh, said Charles, and he shivered. There's less work for me in the winter, said Hank, though I must say I prefer the summer. I've got a touch of rheumatism in my hind leg, and these cold nights set it to aching. Of course, said Charles sympathetically, they would. It's a shame. You ought to have a blanket or something to cover you, and this barn is terribly drafty at night. But Mr. Bean, he never thinks how the animals and the birds suffer. He sleeps warm under his feather bed and 4 patchwork quilts. He doesn't care as long as he's warm. Now take me. Every morning, winter and summer, I have to get up before daylight, crawl out of my comfortable coop, and crow and get things started on the farm, just because he's too stingy to buy himself an old alarm clock. Doesn't matter how cold and rainy it is, it has to be done. And if I miss a morning, what do I get? I get fricasseed, that's what. It does seem sort of hard, said Hank. I guess it does. And now winter's coming. I detest winter, but I've got to get out just the same and wait around in the snow and freeze my bill. I wouldn't mind so much if I was warm the rest of the time. If there was a stove in the hen house and a couple of good wool blankets to sleep under, that hen house ought to have a cellar under it too. The floor's as cold as stone. Hank sighed. Yes, he agreed, it's a hard life. There's no denying it. But what can we do about it? A little twittering voice answered from high up under the roof. Why don't you migrate? It said. They looked up, but it was dark in the roof, and they could not see anything. Who are you? Said Charles. And what are you talking about? I'm a barn swallow, said the voice, and I'm talking about migrating. We birds all migrate every year, and I don't see why you can't do it too if you don't like the winter. Oh, you don't, said Charles rather crossly. Well, suppose you tell us what you are talking about. If it's worth listening to, we can't keep track of everything you little unimportant birds do. Charles, being a farm bird, felt very superior to all of the wild birds, and he puffed out his chest with importance. But the swallow only laughed chirpily. You needn't be so grand, she said. And after all, you've never been outside your own barnyard, and you have to do as you are told, or get fricasseed. And I've traveled thousands of miles in my time, and I don't take orders from anyone. Well, Charles began angrily, but Hank shook his head at him. She may have something interesting to tell us, he said. And then he asked the swallow politely if she would explain to them what migrating was. So she told them that every fall, when it began to get cold, the birds gathered together in big flocks and started south. They traveled hundreds of miles, and some of them went to Florida, and some went to Central or South America. All winter long, she said, it was sunny and warm down south. There was never any snow, never any cold winds, and there was always plenty to eat. And then, in the spring, they came back north again. When she had told them this, she dropped the twitter from the roof and dropped with the twitter from the roof and shot like an arrow out through the open door into the warm sunshine. Do you believe it? Charles asked when she was gone. He felt beneath his dignity to pay much attention to anything a swallow could tell him, although he was really very much interested. Yes, said Hank, I have heard of it before, and it sounds pretty good, but it wouldn't do for me, I'm afraid. It's a long road to Florida. If I could fly, though, I won't say that I wouldn't try it. I can't fly, said Charles, not much that is, but I would walk a good many miles to find a place where it was warm and sunny all winter, and where I shouldn't have to get up in the morning till I got good and ready. It wouldn't be any fun going alone, of course, but if I could get up a party, "If you could get up a party," said Hank, "I won't say I shouldn't like to go myself." Charles jumped down from the manger. "I'm going to see some of the other animals," he said. "If they're interested, we'll have a meeting tonight and talk it over." And he went out into the yard. The more he thought about it, the more excited he became. He went out into the orchard and talked to an oriole and a couple of blackbirds, and the tales that they told him of the lazy life they led in the tropical southern sunshine fairly made his mouth water. And then he went to see the pigs and the cows and the other animals, and they were all very much interested and said that they had all been dreading the long cold winter, and that if he really knew of a place where it was warm and sunshiny, they would be very glad to go there. So he invited them to come to a meeting that evening in the cow barn, where he would tell them all about it, and those who wanted to go could talk it over and decide when to start. That is the end of chapter 1 of Freddy Goes to Florida. And this is Grandma Carla, and I love you, and happy birthday, little Charis Ann.